and said, "You'll never do 10 years in an hour."
That's true. We didn't do. I'm having a hard time doing just the 2 years of Trinity. I mean,
Oh, really?
yeah. An hour goes really quickly.
Oh, it's airplane. Yeah. Walt, can you count to 10 for me?
Can I? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay, thanks. Okay. I'm just running some bars right now, Michael.
Okay. And one thing to remind you is that this doesn't have to be perfectly said. I'm more interested in what you remember and your opinion, and
Okay.
you know, I'm not relying on you to give me history to its degree, but I'm kind of interested in the Walt history.
Okay, I see.
You know, so I mean, I think people are interested to find.
But we had a number of dry runs. We went crazy with the number of dry runs because there were so many customers, and as the time got shorter, the customers' interest increased tremendously.
So you had a lot of people who wanted a lot from you.
Yeah, and then we did all our dry runs prior to the time that the gadget was put on the tower. Of course, that was a no-no once that was accomplished. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about that. I got one more thing to do.
Rolling?
Okay, here we are. Walt Tribals going to Trinity. What was your job?
My job at Trinity was to assist Joe McKibben in any ways that he thought he needed help. And that involved mostly installation of the equipment that we used for timing operations and for the measurement of data as observed from various pieces of equipment.
Do you want to just, you know, we can turn the camera off and you and I can just talk.
For the 100-ton shot, and we went down 4 days before that event occurred.
Yeah.
And then we left there and brought back most of our equipment. The rest of the equipment was sent by Army vehicles back to the hill where we did some more testing, so to speak.
But down at Trinity, what did you have to do? I mean, I really don't understand what you were doing down there. I guess that's what I wanted to have come out in the show.
Oh, okay.
And we can just rough it out.
Since McKibben was in charge of the timing, overall timing, we had a number of customers that wanted to turn on their equipment, and so Joe finally made a listing and a data sheet, if you will, as to who would be on the air at what particular time and how much time he could have on the air. And I would run the equipment for Joe, or part of the equipment for Joe, to collect this information and determine the results.
So what kinds of things did they want you to do? I mean, what was the plan?
Well, how many times may I turn on this equipment today, and who am I in competition with because they don't need this as much as I do?
Yeah, okay. I'm still not sure how it all networked. I mean, when you say the timing, how could we tell people exactly what that meant? I'm kind of confounded like that, by that myself.
Well, sometimes timing is expressed in terms of microseconds from the time that the initial signal gets to the device until the explosion starts to occur. That's a microsecond type of timing. As one goes further along the line, as the explosion gets bigger, time increases, and it's even further extended when the detonation occurs at full-blown size of the cloud.
But what did they want you to time? I mean, if you're running timing equipment for all these customers, what were you organizing for them?
Well, I wasn't really organizing anything. I was providing a service.
Okay.
In other words, Joe would say, we have so many customers today, and I've arranged for them to contact you, and you will run such and such a portion of this equipment, which I would do.
What kinds of things were they timing out down there? You mentioned something to me on the phone. You said shockwave tests and all kinds of stuff. Well,
All righty. One of the things that was incorporated into the timing system was a device which would, if you will, integrate the time from zero. Let me change that. Shut that off until I get this straight in my mind. The system did not have a capability to decipher a blast at so many feet or yards away from zero as compared with so many yards away from zero. And I guess Joe McKibben designed the equipment so that even if this unit went off at the same time that the explosion was being generated within the device, at this next station, much further, the time would obviously be greater because it takes time for a blast wave to propagate through the air. Does that help us any?
yeah, I think so. It sounds like you were really providing a service for all the different people who wanted to have their own little tests done.
All the people who wanted timing performed came to Joe, and I did some of the legwork insofar as fulfilling their desires.
What were some of those desires?
How many times may I be on the air today? How long do I have? And as I said earlier, the closer you got to zero time, the increase of requests was a great increase in magnitude.
Yeah. I was just curious when you said desires. I thought maybe shockwave tests or error detonate. I mean, I see that's where I get lost.
All right, the shockwave tests only take place when the detonation is for real.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to tell you about that. Ask me again, please.
Well, see, why don't you stop for a second, Kevin? Because I think I don't understand.
Another way.
Okay.
After the 100-ton shot, we were getting ready for the real thing, and we didn't go down back to the test site until late June. And don't forget the detonation date was the 16th. Well, as time progressed, we got all sorts of additional requests because the pressure of getting ready. Some people wanted to postpone the tests, and the management didn't think kindly of that idea. So, the more that we had requests for tests, the later we worked those days to accomplish that. Then there were some other interesting kinds of problems. Our messages would have the capability of going to other stations and users if the 100 miles of field wire were connected appropriately to our equipment. Sometimes we had a short in the field wire. Sometimes we had an open in the field wire. We didn't have to fix it. We had some engineer people out there, and they would go through the routine of repairing as necessary.
Well, it must have been kind of a pain in the ass.
Well, there's lots of things in life that are a pain in the ass.
Well, 100 miles of cable is a lot of cable, Walt.
Well, I'm talking collectively now. You see, there's several parallel lines. Well, here, let's look at it this way.
Okay.
10,000 yards, that's 1,760 yards in a mile. 10,000 yards would be about 6 times that, right? and we had 4 stations. And then we had some extra lines put in parallel in case we couldn't repair the others. So 100 miles isn't a bad number for the number of wires we had.
Help me out. What were all those cables connected to? Can you somehow sum up what was going on? I mean, there's all those pictures of all this stuff all over the place.
Okay. The stuff that belonged to Joe McKibben consisted of some relays that had 32 steps in them, capable of providing 32 steps. We had output switches. We had timing drum. We tested these relays so that we knew they would work properly, and there were, everybody has a specification. Los Alamos has a specification. The timing people who made the relays had their own standard, and we used to take the data we acquired to Joe, and he would decide this is a good one or that's a bad one. We hardly ever found a bad one. Output switches, pilot lights. What else? I think that does it.
Yeah. So there's about 100 miles of cable running around all these bunkers and all these test equipment. Is that right?
The grand total of all the wiring was about 100 miles, as I remember it.
I can't get in my mind. I've seen all the pictures. I see all the bunkers. Were all the bunkers wired to Joe?
No.
I'm sorry.
Okay, let's try that. All the wiring in the bunkers for the work that we were doing for Joe McKibben were not necessarily our property. There were many other experiments going on, and they would take signals from our boxes and feed it into their networks. Does that help any?
No, that helps a lot. So you weren't really in charge of the shockwave tests, or?
No.
Okay.
I feel I was a pair of hands and feet. But it was fun.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that helps. That straightens some things out. We can stop for a second, Kevin.
Equipment together. Then we started to run dry run tests, and we dry ran, I don't know how many days and how many hours. But don't forget, this is the first time that this kind of a thing was ever done, so people were really very diligent and careful about what they did. When it came to the time when we had the real live countdown, I operated one of these boxes with wires in it and relays in it and pilot lights and output switches, and Joe had compiled a series of test sheets that told me what to do and when to do it, and then he would converse with me over the air and say, did you get a red light, did you get a green light, etc. Finally, zero time came around, and within a few seconds, the light emitted from the detonation was absolutely tremendous. It was brighter than the sun. I say exclamation mark, but I think it was brighter than the sun. And when that tremendous light came in the back door of our bunker, it lit up like Hollywood. And then we were instructed previously, don't run out and look at the fireball until so many seconds. Then we went out and looked at the fireball, and shortly thereafter we felt the shock wave, And it was quite impressive to feel the shock wave. You get the feeling it's going to blow you over. And then there was lots of thunder in the mountains as a result of this big explosion we made. Does that help you any?
Yeah, sure. So you remember it pretty vividly then.
Oh, I think that witnessing a detonation is something that lives in your mind forever. And the one that's the most important is the first one, because it puts the fear of God in you.
Do you remember what you were thinking about when you saw that thing go off, or what your reaction was?
Everybody else left the bunker that I was in a hurry, and they left me with my Jeep. And I drove back into the camp and picked up another fellow that was working with us, and away we went back to Albuquerque.
But you remember your reaction? I mean, Ben Benjamin remembers standing there on top of West 10,000 with Julian Mack saying, "Oh my God, it's beautiful," and Mack shoots back to him, "Yeah, it's terrible too."
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know if you had any, if you remember your reaction or what.
There were some other thoughts that we haven't covered yet, and I'm not sure we're capable of covering them all. But some scientists thought that the yield would be much better and might blow us off the face of the earth. Other scientists didn't think we would do as well as we did. I had a strong feeling of fear with the fireball stopped growing. And it was beautiful to look at insofar as the colors and things like this. And I guess I don't know how to respond to you because I helped put 23 more of those things off.
Yeah. So, it was somewhat fearful, somewhat beautiful. Did you say, "Oh my God, boy, the war is going to be over tomorrow if we get to use these things"? Or?
Oh, I think the people were very optimistic about if it worked as well as it did, that the war would soon be over.
But this is the Walt story. I'm just wondering if you had thought about that.
Try me again.
What did you think? I mean, did you have any of those kinds of thoughts, like, boy, we're going to win the war with this thing?
Oh, yes.
Was that fear something that made you just say, wow, that thing's a really huge weapon and we could do what we want with it and we could end this war? I'm trying to remember.
As I recall it, most people thought that we would win the war and win the war in a hurry, which turned out to be true. And some people thought they would need to drop more bombs on Japan. But of course, that hadn't happened yet. When I'm saying that, I'm in an error to bring that in at this time.
Yeah. So you thought this thing was going to win the war?
Oh, yes.
Tell me that in a complete sentence.
I was very impressed with the detonation, and I was convinced that we would win the war almost immediately with the use of these things over Japan. Is that good enough?
That's great. Sure. Hey, I'm not afraid of putting words in your mouth. As long as
I don't mind. I hope I'm doing a satisfactory job for you.
You're doing great. What else do we talk about? What about the ending of the war and using the bomb? What do you think? I mean, here's the tough question. I don't think we could do a show about Trinity without talking about the impact of that weapon. Do you think it was good to use it, and that it was, or was it bad? What's your reaction?
My reaction was, I think that President Truman made the right decision. And I would say, in addition to that, people compare today's systems with 1945, and you can't do that because the ground rules were so different. We were at war for one thing, and we're not at war now. And people come and ask you, does your conscience bother you for doing this? And I say, hell no, I'm proud to be a part of it. Does that help?
That's great. Yeah. Yeah, because I think those are important questions, and people kind of forget their history.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you're here today, to help us remember it.
Well,
What else? Did you feel kind of a sense of pride or a little sense of kind of satisfaction that you, in whatever big or small way?
very, very much so. A matter of pride and accomplishment.
Did you, when that thing went off, did you kind of breathe a sigh of relief that God, after all of these?
Oh, yes, you do that. Once the time has been established of when we're going to detonate this thing, everybody who's had anything to do with it starts to count. And you can appreciate that you can be a couple of seconds off for an airdrop, but after that, well, you get very nervous. Why the hell doesn't that damn thing go off? And we've lucked it, I think.
We've done what?
We've lucked it.
What does that mean?
Well, of all the narrow escapes that we have had, we've never really killed anybody or hurt anybody severely or any of that sort of thing. And there are lots of programs that are around. Well, just think of the Florida operations and the loss of all those people. That's a terrible bear. And
Yeah. Okay. What else do we need to talk about? You can cut for a second.
Okay.
I need to think of a couple of words. The bomb's being exploded. It hasn't really enlarged to be a full-scale detonation yet. And there's a signal that comes out of some equipment that people had. And one wants to make sure that the blast wave information is accurate, because this is the first time somebody's detonated an A-bomb. So back another 10,000 yards, there's another blast station. And of course, the time that it takes to travel is a certain finite time. And prior to that, I don't think anybody had calculated what the delays might be. Is that helping us any?
Yeah, a little bit. So you had to figure that out then.
No, I didn't figure it out.
Well, you had to help them figure it out. You had to help them lay it out.
Joe McKibben was a real smart cookie. He still is a real smart cookie. He's a very gentle man, I think. And
So
he bestows credit on on other people, but he never blows his own horn.
So he figured out all these delays and these timings and these relays and all that other stuff?
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say he figured it all out.
But what was his responsibility?
But what he was capable of figuring is, the unit is initiated and the explosive is traveling through the system but not grown very big yet. And so many microseconds later, we get radiation level information. We get information about how long to leave equipment on and how long to keep it off and things like that. I don't know. I don't feel satisfied to what I told you there.
Let's try something. What were you synchronizing?
What were we synchronizing? Got to look at my notes again.
But it doesn't have to be one specific test or another, but in general, what were you synchronizing?
Joe McKibben in his report writes, all observational equipment. Now, if you don't think that's pretty vague, and I've just copied his words.
Yeah. But you were synchronizing like shockwave tests.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, I'm not so sure we were synchronizing them. We were synchronizing the fact that some of these things are additive, in other words. I don't like what I said there.
Yeah,
either.
I'm lost. I don't know.
10,000, yeah.
Okay, there we go.
South 10,000 was the control point of all operations. And all the wires from the various users, and including the stations that we had provided at North 10,000, South 10,000, West 10,000, and West 800, were all fed back into South 10,000, and that's why there were so many wires around that location.
And what exactly was your job with those wires? And you were up at North 10,000?
Well, I was up at North 10,000 during the countdown and doing what was prescribed for me to do in accordance with the data sheet by my boss.
What were some of those specific things you had to do?
Okay. As I recall it, there were 4 stepping relays, and each one could step 32 steps. And so had a function to be performed at step 7. And then when step 8 came along, he was disconnected and somebody else was on board for whatever he was interested in. I don't feel very comfortable about talking about that officially, though. I want to make sure.
How would you sum up your job at Trinity?
Participated in a lot of dry runs. I need to tell you more things. When you say at Trinity, you must remember that there was another sergeant and myself who put all this stuff together, so many relays and so many switches and so many of this and that, and we wired up the whole thing together. And what I'm driving at then is that was the bulk of our job until we got to Trinity, and then we were mostly involved in dry runs.
Okay. Who laid out all those wires and hooked up all the relays and stuff like that?
We internally, within each box, we did it ourselves. When it came to sending these wires from North 10,000 to South 10,000, that was a Corps of Engineer people, I shouldn't say that, Army engineering people, not academically, but title-wise, they were engineers. They strung all the field wire. And then some of us helped connect the field wire to our equipment, and some of the people who wanted the measurements made took their end of the field wire and hooked up to their equipment, etc. Does that help any?
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like there was a ton of stuff going on out there.
Oh, yes.
Was there just stuff all over the place? I mean, was there experiments going on all over the place? Or how many experiments would you think were going on just in general?
Well, I don't remember, to tell you the truth. But I think they're in the hundreds. And some of them weren't examples of experiments. Some of them were examples of what to do and what not to do. In other words, that when the radiation levels started to climb out in the field, get the hell out of there.
Okay. Do me a favor, just for television, just so that I have a complete statement. Say there are hundreds of experiments. You just said I thought there were hundreds, but I don't know. I'm just trying to sum up some way with you, because we know that you were involved in timing and stuff like that. But